Welcome to Pullback. I'm Kyla and I'm here with Kristen.
Hey!
Each episode, we challenge ourselves to try something new in ethical consumption. Then we tell you what we learned, fuck-ups and all. This episode is hopefully a little bit more lighthearted than our last few episodes. We're going to be talking about cannabis, and we're recording this on 4/20/20, so fist bump
Yes.
But only because we absolutely, dropped the ball and didn't even think to record this sooner and actually release it on 4/20/20. But I think recording it on 4/20 is more fun. Anyway.
I think we realized that 4/20 was a thing on 4/19, so...
Yeah. I was like, but I mean, to be fair, we are still in the middle of the pandemic and time has no meaning. It could be, I don't know, January right now. I don't know what,
That is true.
Sorry, my dry mouth is kicking in already.
Yeah. I may have to refill my water at some point.
So yeah, maybe we should just start with that. We had some edibles before this episode. I don't know. I think mine is starting to kick in right now. Got that dry mouth going. How are you feeling?
I feel very chill right now, so...
Oh, good.
I think it's phase 1 of 3 phases for me when I have edibles. Phase 2 is I think everything's funny. So.
Yeah, you sent me a link of just a whole bunch of pictures of dogs stuck in places. Dogs stuck on half their legs are on the other side of a bush or something.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that is objectively funny, but I found it disproportionately funny.
What's the third phase for you?
I just get sleepy and or hungry.
Nice. Yeah. Have you ever been too high? What's the highest you've ever been?
Oh, it was definitely recently. It was yeah. It's a very strong memory. This is the one time I've ever been anxious off of weed. I think it was January or maybe December. And I had been gifted for the holiday season this package of edibles. And I was not sure because it was a package with 4 little square-shaped hard candies in it. And I was like, okay, so the regulations I think say something about how you have to have single dosage in a package, but there's also 4 of these. So is it 1 dose or 4? And I reasoned that it must all be the same, took all 4. It's the highest I've been in my entire life. At a certain point in the middle of the night, it all hit me, and I could just feel waves all over my body on my legs, and I was hyperventilating. Oh, it was a bad time, but also kind of nice for some of it.
Yeah, I've experienced something similar to that. I was in Amsterdam, naturally.
Sure.
So I bought a space cake, obviously. It was the first time I'd ever had an edible, and I was like, well, I'm in Amsterdam. I've gotta. But they told me to take a quarter of it, and I was like, this thing looks huge. So I took less than that, and it was still way too much. I was in my hostel, and yeah, the vibrations all over my body felt my eyeballs were vibrating. I went and lied down for 12 hours straight. And yeah, in the middle of the night, I was like, I can see time. Time and I, one thing.
I didn't even realize that you could get a hangover from weed. I just didn't think that was a thing. But I was super tired and cranky the entire next day.
Yeah, I feel you probably were higher than even my highest was probably nothing. 4 edibles at once, Kristen. Damn.
I know, it was such a I don't know what past Kristen was thinking, honestly.
Oh boy. Okay, well, we're clearly getting there. Before we ramble the entire episode away, do you have any fun research about cannabis? Hopefully all good news for once.
Yeah, I've got some research on cannabis. It was kind of interesting because although I have consumed my share of cannabis, I am fairly I am not the most knowledgeable person about all the different varieties and the different ways to consume cannabis. And also it's such a changing space that it's kind of hard to was kind of overwhelming.
It's newly legal, so I mean...
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's super crazy how it went from being a totally illegal product to, well, I guess with medical use allowed, but to being an essential service in Canada in a year. What What an underdog story.
Yeah. Pandemic essentials, liquor and weed.
You know what? I'm okay with our country's priorities.
Like, what did you learn then? Because you were kind of starting from square one.
So a couple of things. I thought that it would probably be useful to talk about how cannabis works and what it does briefly. Like, people probably will know most things, but hopefully they'll be able to fill in some gaps for some people. Certainly some of this stuff I didn't know. Then I thought we could talk about, like, legalization, because it has really been sort of the important driving factor behind cannabis. And then I'll talk a little bit about some ethical issues. Most of that information is about the environment, because that seems to be what people have thought about the most with cannabis. But yeah, we'll talk about a few things.
Okay, great. Oh boy, I'm so excited.
So how does cannabis work, just to start with? So essentially, humans and plants share similar chemical compounds that are called cannabinoids. So in people, we call them endocannabinoids, but they're pretty similar to the plant version. And basically, we make our own endocannabinoids through our endocannabinoid system. And it's thought to basically control things to do with how we feel, how we move, and how we react.
Wait, I've never heard of this before. Did you get this from Gwyneth Paltrow's website, or like?
No, this is real. Yeah, it's it's real. This is why you get high from pot.
Really? Okay, so
yeah.
I had no idea that we had an endocannabinoid system.
Sorry, my alarm is going off. I've set a timer to let us know when it was 4:20 where you are.
Oh my god, you are so sweet. It is 4:20. I didn't even notice. That's a delight. Thank you. You are so considerate.
Except that I also interrupted you in saying that. So.
That's okay. I was just struggling to say endocannabinoids, so I don't think it matters.
I know. I was watching a couple of videos on endocannabinoids, and I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. But sorry if I'm mispronouncing it the entire episode, people that know.
Okay, so tell me more about that, because this is news to me. This sounds like pseudoscience, but I trust that you would have gotten it from a real source, so this is amazing.
Well, I think it's just like any other system where you have chemicals that do things in your body, right? Like, you have receptors, those receptors take in whatever, and then that's where my knowledge stops. It does things.
She's waving her hands like, it's magic. Okay, cool. Got it. Magic.
Yeah.
So that's why we get high, because it like reacts with the cannabinoids in the flower?
Kind of, yeah. So essentially before I just talk about THC and CBD, so there are two kinds of cannabinoid receptors, and depending on which receptors, that can sort of influence what the cannabinoids do. There's a CB1 receptor, which is it's located mostly in your central nervous system. So that connects to your brain. So that's sort of one type of effect. And then the second type is found primarily in the immune system. So it has sort of other effects if the receptors there are the ones you're dealing with. So anyway, basically what happens is you have the marijuana plant has hundreds of cannabinoids, but the two that are most well known are THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol.
That sounds right.
THC. And then cannabidiol or cannabidiol. I don't know. CBD.
CBD and THC. That's all we need to know.
Yeah. So, like, because we have receptors in different places, and every single person has, like, their receptors might be in slightly different places from one another, and you also might have more or fewer of these receptors. So our reactions to THC and CBD aren't always the same. And that's partially because of those receptors, where they are, how many of them you have. And it's partially also things like, how did you consume it? How often do you use cannabis? There are genetic impacts. How old are you? What's your sexuality, or your sex, not sexuality. It probably doesn't matter. Can't see how that would influence THC at all. But yeah, personality, mood, and mental health conditions. But the two well-known effects are THC produces the high that's associated with cannabis. And then CBD doesn't generally produce a high, but it's associated with things like pain relief, anxiety reduction, and a few other health benefits.
So what I have understood from CBD research is that there is almost none of it. And a lot of the effects of CBD are like anecdotal, and not a lot of them have been proven. So when somebody's like, oh, do you want to get something with more CBD in it? I'm like, well, that might be fairy dust. So give me all the THC you got, because I'm paying to get high.
I like a more sort of balanced one with some CBD in it, because I find it chills me out a little bit. I'm fairly high strung, I think.
Oh, so. Yeah, same. Maybe I should lean more into the CBD variety.
Yeah, have more of the fairy dust. But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of rumors out there about what CBD can do. And I mean, one of the things is some people think it might have an effect with cancer, but like that's not at all proven yet. Maybe in 20 years we'll know there's some effect, but maybe there won't be. Whereas like there does seem to be a little bit more information about the pain relief and the anxiety aspects, but who knows? In general, the effects of cannabis are temporary, and they include those sort of fun things that you like, as well as they mellow you out a little bit. But there are also some unpleasant effects that are generally temporary that can be a result from having too much cannabis. So that includes an inability to concentrate. We may have seen that represented already in this episode. Memory problems, anxiety, panic or paranoia, disorganized thoughts, dizziness or hallucinations, reduced reaction time, and sleepiness. I just want to make sure we're giving like a balanced and scientific perspective on weed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I mean, the thing, one of the ethical issues that I'm sure you'll bring up later with weed is that like all of the hippy-dippy stuff that ties it to, well, you kind of already talked about it, all of these effects like, hey, maybe it cures cancer. And it's like, that is not a thing. So stop advertising it like it is, you know? Like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard to de-goop it.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. So yeah, and it does have some negative effects, and some people have a better time on it than others. It's the same with anything.
Yeah, and if you're sort of newer to cannabis or are thinking about trying it and are in a place where it's legal, because I guess we really shouldn't be condoning illegal things, even if I personally think marijuana should be legal everywhere. But if you want to avoid the unpleasant effects of cannabis, one sort of suggestion is to consume cannabis with a low THC content and to consume a small amount over a period of time to increase that consumption either the next time or, whatever, based on how you react. Don't do what I did and eat
Don't have 4 hits at once. Yeah, I was
don't
just
have 4 hits
at
once. Yeah. If you're not sure, be cautious. Yeah. And you can also find tips for responsible use on government websites, health organizations. So check those out too if you're concerned. There aren't a lot of long-term effects that they have associated with marijuana, partly because I don't think they've done enough research. But there are a few long-term effects that can develop if you use frequently. So that would be like daily or near daily and for a long time, especially if you've started consuming cannabis in your youth, which is not legal. But it messes with your brain. So most of these they're sort of small effects and you have to use a lot, but harms to memory, concentration, and an ability to think and make decisions. So there can be some effect if you're a really, really heavy user, but sort of unknown. The only long-term health effect, so effect on the body rather than the brain, is from smoke inhalation that they know of. So
that's not good, whether it's THC or nicotine or, whatever. Smoke's not your lungs doesn't like it.
Yeah, lungs don't like it. And it's exactly the same as the tobacco effects, right? So bronchitis, lung infections, increased mucus buildup in the throat, gross shit like that. But if you're not smoking it, so far they know of no long-term body effects. So just like a quick note on how cannabis production works, it's not a super complicated supply chain, but there are some steps.
That's a relief. For us.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah, so step 1 is you have to grow the thing, so cultivation, you know. Then after that, a lot of times, unless you're just buying like cannabis flower, they need to extract the cannabis from, or they extract like the THC and the CBD and whatever else they want from the cannabis plant. And then they have to undergo testing because it's a regulated substance, and then distribution and retail. So they have to get it out there, and then people have to sell it.
It's pretty simple.
Kind of makes sense, but I think it's important to sort of note that with cannabis companies, I try to look into the market a little bit, and it seems to be some companies will sort of specialize in one stage of the production, but there are a few major cannabis companies that try to sort of be involved for multiple stages. And so you'll often see like a cannabis company that does processing of different things, and then they also have like retail outlets. So they might sell their brand in a retail outlet. One of the most interesting things about cannabis is how legalization is sort of unfolding around the world. And there are a few countries that have either legalized, partially legalized, or decriminalized marijuana. So it's pretty common actually for countries to have legalized for medical use. That there's at least like 10 to 15 countries that have done that. And then decriminalizing all or part of cannabis can also be, or cannabis use can also happen. It's fairly rare for countries to have legalized recreational use of marijuana. Uruguay is a country that did, and Canada is a country that did. And I think we are the only two at a state level, though at a federal level, though there are some subnational governments that have legalized recreational use. So there are a bunch of American states that have it. So yeah, in Canada, as we know, recreational pot became legal in October 2018. It was a very high Halloween.
I wasn't here. But you know, the first time I landed back in Canada after being away for like 4 years, I met you in Newfoundland, and it was like 2 a.m. and I was like, Kristen, you're like trying to sleep. Kristen, can we go to a dispensary tomorrow? It's like the first thing I did when I landed in Canada. I was like, man, weed's been legal here for like a year and I haven't been able to go to a dispensary yet. And then we flew it home to Edmonton, or I did anyways. I was like, Kristen, am I allowed to take this on the airplane? And you were like, yeah, Kyla, it's legal. And I was like, I felt like a criminal going through the security bag line.
You're just giving side eye to all the dogs in the airport. Like, hey, don't narc. So I found a headline that just made me giggle, so I wanted to talk about it. So there's a CBC News article that said Canada's cannabis policy makes it an international rebel on drug trees.
Canada rebels.
I don't know. If you think about international reputations of Canada, no, not rebels.
Drug rebel. That's us. So tourism's not working right now, but when it was, a couple months ago, I used to take tour buses across the border into Seattle. And what we would tell people is border agents, when you're going into the United States, they're worried that you're trying to smuggle in weed. When you're coming back from the United States, they're worried that you're trying to smuggle in guns. And I'm like, I know what side of the border I'd rather live on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's been really interesting, though, to be watching something become legal and what that looks like, and all the things that are sort of unexpected that change when that happens. So in late 2018, so like the very early stages of marijuana legalization, there were about 130 licensed producers. I don't have a current stat for how many there are now, but there must be many more because, I mean, Ontario had problems in its rollout of weed. It was originally going to use like the liquor outlet as the distributor, and then they decided they weren't going to do that, and instead they were going to privatize, but by then they didn't really have licenses. So there were only like 25 pot stores in all of Ontario, which is Canada's biggest province. It has like more than a third of the country's population. And there are 25 places you could buy weed, like brick and mortar shops, compared to...
Alberta's a good comparison for that. Is that where you were going to go?
Yeah, Alberta, it had more than 300 after, in the same period, so...
Yeah, they nailed it.
That's why you elect Social Democrats, Kyla. Yeah, so you've got this sort of interesting thing where all of the different provinces have slightly different systems, but the regulation is happening also at the federal level, so they oversee production and processing, and then the provinces are sort of dealing with how distribution, wholesaling, and retailing works. So like at the end of the process, they're involved. So yeah, as of February 2020, so just a couple of months ago, the Canadian cannabis industry, both legal and illegal, is about $8 billion. So
whoa,
a lot of people buying pot. Yeah.
Well, I remember there was an issue when pot was first legalized. Like a bunch of my friends bought pot stocks, and then they were not worth anything. Like the stocks went way down, but I don't know why. But it sounds like the industry's worth something now. I have no idea.
Well, the industry's so I think it suffered right at the beginning because of those rollout problems. Some provinces were really good, but some were really bad. And I think then it started to expand, but there are two things. One is that it hasn't, so it was sort of, pot was like a bubble a little bit. It was overvalued. And so even though, yeah, definitely people are buying lots of legal weed, they're not buying maybe as many as was predicted, and it's not growing as fast as was predicted because there was some sort of idea that legalization in Canada, given some of the other movements that have happened, might sort of create a tipping point, and you'd suddenly see weed legalization in a bunch more places.
Oh.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have happened. Certainly, there are a few more, but...
No, but that's not an unreasonable assumption to make. Like, hey, yeah, Canada's cool. If Canada's doing it, then it must be all right.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe in the longer term that'll happen. Probably, I can only imagine, given that pot really shouldn't be illegal for any reason.
It's a pretty harmless substance, really. Personally, I mean, this is very much an opinion, but it makes me feel a lot less sick than alcohol. I'm way less likely to take too much as opposed to alcohol. I'm not me personally, but most people, again, maybe anecdotally, are less likely to start fist fights in bars over a joint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe that's unfair. I don't know if you did any alcohol weed comparisons for this.
No, I didn't, but you and I met, well, we didn't meet through debate, but we both did debate. So there's a rule that we kind of used to have in debate where it was okay. It was considered to be a fair case as long as you were arguing against something that is the status quo, so the way the world is right now. And the one exception to that rule was legalizing pot was not considered to be a fair case because there's no argument against it. So I think that says a lot. So we were talking about the factors behind why maybe there was a bubble in cannabis. And yeah, one of them is that demand isn't rising maybe as quickly as people had thought. And it was overvalued. And the second one is that there genuinely have been some problems in getting the legalized market up and running. So a lot of the weed that Canadians are consuming is still illegal from illegal sources. About close to 40%, so just under 40% of adult cannabis users reported having obtained cannabis from the black market in the last year. And so I think that was done in February 2020 as well. So, it could have been relatively close to legalization when that started. Ontario was still certainly having lots of problems during that year. So it may be that this year things start to move upward, but as it stands, almost not that far from half of Canadians are still consuming illegal weed rather than legal only. So,
well, I mean, if your neighbor had to grow up from before and you're still getting it from them, then why change? Especially if there's no dispensary near you. But if you're buying it from a stranger, then I'm like, oh, what's in this? I'd rather go to the government shop. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Yeah, so the main sources are that people are getting legal cannabis is through retailers. And then online is the next most common. And then after that, people still get weed from medical providers, and they also sometimes grow their own, but only about 6% of users do that. And I think some of that is because if you are a renter, usually you're not allowed to grow weed.
I mean, it's a smelly plant. I think
Yeah.
we can all agree on that.
Yeah, when it comes to like where people are getting their illegal weed from, the first source is friends, actually. So yeah, if you're getting sourced from your friend down the street that happens to grow a few plants, then you may have no reason to switch to legal weed. And we can talk about the ethics of that a little later, but the other ones are private dispensaries. So some of the private dispensaries that are still in operation, even though they're not licensed. Online, and then family. Those are the next largest sources. So actually, on family, I'll maybe tell a story of... It's my favorite story I've ever been told by anyone. So.
Okay, great. Oh, wow.
I might have oversold it a bit, but I really enjoy it. So I have a friend who her family on, I think her mother's side, but I might be wrong, is Mormon. And so her immediate family is the first part of that family that has left the Mormon church, and all their other relatives on that side are Mormon. And Mormon grandma has a long-term health condition for which it's been suggested that CBD could sort of maybe improve things. So the family decides, we're going to get some pot for grandma. And of course, they turn to my friend because she's like the most badass of the entire extended family. Like, she's the one that's most likely to have networks to to the seedy parts of society. And it's just funny because if you talk to this friend of mine, she is very much not like that. She's a very sweet person. So only the Mormon side of her family could have possibly thought that. But anyway, she does find somebody that she knows that can give her, get her some pot, and then she gives it to her mom, and her mom decides that she's gonna take the pot with grandma. That's gonna be the thing they do together, I think, to make grandma less nervous about it.
Aww.
Yeah. But they both ingest way too much and end up, grandma ends up greened out to the point that she can't get out of the restaurant booth that they're in.
Oh no, they went to a restaurant? Yeah. Rookie mistake.
Yeah. So anyway, it's the Mormon grandma story.
Well, but I mean, like, I shouldn't judge them too harshly. First of all, that's a great story. But when I took my first legal weed here in Canada, I was with you, and I had some of that oil, because you were like, oh, oil's a great way to have it. And I was like, I've never had it that way before. And then we went to a restaurant, and I got soups high just in the middle of dinner. And I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, you were so nervous about it, and I don't think anybody noticed.
I was like, Kristen, people are going to know I'm high. And you're like, well... A, they won't if you stop saying that. And B, it's allowed now. And I just couldn't.
So yeah, one other reason that people are still sort of staying in the illegal market, in addition to the fact that oftentimes they can just go to their friends and get it, is that legal cannabis tends to be about 60% more expensive than illegal cannabis. And especially early in the rollout, there were supply issues during the initial period. And that meant that not only was weed more expensive through the legal options, but you could also maybe not get as good selection, or...
It wasn't fresh. Yeah, everyone was complaining. They're like, I just paid an extra 60% for this, and it's not even fresh. Like...
Exactly. Yeah, and also, like... I remember when weed was legalized in Ontario... the government website crashed.
Oh yeah.
And it was just, yeah. So there were some problems, and a lot of them are getting solved over time, but weed is still more expensive than it is in the illegal market. Oh yeah. I don't know if you've, like, how many cannabis retail stores you've been in. For me, it's maybe like a handful, but they are fancy as fuck.
They're so fancy. That's why I think the frosted glass rule is stupid. So there's like part of the law for legalization is that they have to have frosted glass windows, I guess. Otherwise,
children may see, yeah.
Yeah, they'll entice people in. And it's like, well, if liquor stores can have clear windows, I don't see the issue here. Also, they're so classy. Like, defrosting the windows would just gentrify a neighborhood instantly overnight.
Yeah, there are some that have pretty cool themes, too. I'm just going to see if I can pull up some of the photos from... Oh, yeah, so there's... I was telling you about the fancy weed shop in Ottawa called Superette. And so their shops are designed to look like diners. I don't know why, but it's kind of cool aesthetic. Then there's Choom has like, it kind of looks like a greener version of an Apple store, basically. And there are like plants everywhere. You also have some that like, there's one that's designed to look like a record store. I can't remember which one that is.
They're so classy.
They're so classy. Yeah. And a lot of them have themes and like various things to build a user experience or whatever. So they know what part of the market they're in. For sure. But yeah, depending on what province of Canada you're in, the way that we sell weed is different. In some provinces, you only have the government weed store, and they'll sell like non-government brands. It's not like it's just, government stamped weed. I actually don't even think that governments produce at all, but I might be wrong on that, so someone tweet at me. But yeah, so you might only have government retail stores, and in that case, it would be, online and physical. And then there are some provinces where you have a mixture of the two. So you have some privately licensed stores, but there's also like a government weed seller. In some cases, it'll just be government online, and then everywhere else is private. And then there's a couple of provinces that have everything privatized. So your online and your physical retail are both only by businesses. And there is one province or territory where there are no physical or provincially based online weed stores. Can you guess where it might be?
None of it?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, but poor none of it.
You crushed it.
I just feel so bad for them.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it's just because the population's too small.
That's why I went straight there. I was like, maybe where nobody lives.
Yeah, I don't know whether if you're like in none of it, like, can you buy online weed from like Northwest Territories or from Quebec?
I mean, everyone in none of it must have their own grow op, so like, why bother?
Yeah. So yeah, the top 5 weed companies control about 3/4 of the Canadian cannabis market. So I think actually my impression is that the weed industry right now, it looks a little bit like the beer industry, if we're talking about on that the alcohol podcast that we did. So like there are a couple of really big pot companies, big relative to like Canada as a market. So globally, they probably wouldn't be monsters if cannabis was legal everywhere, but they're big in the industry as a whole because Canada is the sort of biggest market for it. Actually, I think California legalized, didn't they? They might still be because I think they're bigger than Canada. But point being, it's a huge market, yes. And so Canadian weed companies are generally pretty big.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about the weed industry so far is that because it's new and because it's not available in most other places in the world, most of the stuff we're getting is like local. Like the stuff I'm getting is like from BC, and the stuff you're getting is like from a company based in Ontario that's possibly also growing it out there, Yeah,
I think they do grow it, but I'm not sure. So yeah, I guess maybe we could just chat a little bit about ethics and weed legality, illegality. Like, I couldn't find really anything written on this, and that didn't surprise me that much. So I guess we just have to go off of instinct here. I don't know.
Wait, are you talking about if it should be legal or illegal? It's going to be a short conversation.
No, but like, given that it's legal, is it wrong to buy illegal weed? I guess is the next question.
Oh. I mean, if it's coming from cartels in Mexico, then yes. If it's coming from my grandma's attic, then I don't know. I guess, yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I don't know. So I think there's like an interesting question you could have on whether there's any like independent moral harm to breaking a law. I don't know, maybe, but it's pretty abstract. So like assuming that we just put that aside, then yeah, the question is really like, even if your weed guy is nice, like where is he getting it from? And are there like nefarious criminal networks involved in that?
Or is there more stuff cut in your weed that you don't know about?
True, yeah. And then like, yeah, if you're getting it from like a friend that charges you a few bucks because they're producing more weed than they consume from their household plants, like, I don't know.
That's a victimless crime.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if you're supporting a crime syndicate that is maybe they sell weed to you and maybe they turn and sell like something worse to someone else and it's just like a big business, that seems like dodgier.
Yeah, and the other thing is like workers' rights, right? Which is not to say that you can really know which weed companies are having the best standards. I didn't find anything that helpful on that, partly because there just aren't consumer guides really yet. But yeah, with legal weed, at least you know that there were some labor laws applied to the workers, whereas like, and again, unless you've actually seen the operation and know the person that grew your weed, like you can't know that. So, probably on balance, it's the obvious conclusion that it's better to buy legal weed is...
Yeah, I think so. It's good to parse that out, though. It's a good, like, it's a good thought experiment. Although not really... Yeah, I guess smarter people than us have been having this same thought experiment for a while.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. So yeah, the next section that I called Environment, the Other Green Revolution.
Let's have it.
Yeah. So I looked at a couple of things. Water use is the first one. Unfortunately, not that much practical advice here. Hemp does use a lot of water to grow, so a single marijuana plant can consume up to 6 gallons of water per day. So
it's thirsty.
It's thirsty, yeah, and actually like requires more water relative to like a lot of plant crops. So you can find different operations, though, that have like a different water impact than one another. So buying different brands in theory makes a big difference, but I also wasn't able to find any sort of easy guides for what are the most sustainable pot farms and which breeds buy from them. Maybe that exists and I missed it, or maybe it's coming eventually. And if you're growing cannabis at home, there are some ways that you can do it with more water efficiency. One suggestion is like, because apparently you need like a dehumidifier sometimes to make the air dry enough for the pot plant. So one suggestion is using the water from the dehumidifier to save on water use. So water use, though, there can be some things that make it more or less water efficient, but hard to know as a consumer which you're consuming. But maybe try asking your pot company. So the other one is energy use. Growing weed can take a lot of energy. So, for example, in Denver, Colorado, cannabis accounts for nearly 4% of the city's entire energy use.
Whoa! How did they get that number? That cannot be an accurate statistic. Nobody would tell the truth. I definitely have the legal amount of plants in my building, officer.
Yeah, so it must actually be higher because I think they're just counting like industrial producers.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot that, legal. You're talking about farms, not like home growers.
Well, I'm not sure I'm talking about a farm because this is in Denver, but I don't know. I'm not sure if they counted home growers in this, but...
It's still pretty high. 4%, that's not nothing.
4%, yeah. So most of that is from growing cannabis, so that actually applied to the entire cannabis industry. There was like tiny, tiny slivers on the chart for like retail stores and packaging, but most of it is from growing. So one way to, again, you as a consumer won't know this, but one way to produce weed with more efficient energy use is to get weed that's grown in a greenhouse instead of a dark warehouse. Now that you don't need to hide it, you may as well put it in a greenhouse. Just use the natural light. So yeah, the third environmental impact, and the one that has been by far most talked about, is packaging. I think this is true everywhere, but especially given the way that Canada has chosen to go with regulations. So cannabis has to be sold in small quantities in child-proof packaging, and those requirements will often preclude the use of like recyclable materials. So it means that a lot of cannabis packaging ends up being single-use plastic that is not recyclable plastics. There's an estimate that about 10,000 tons of packaging was generated in the first year of weed legalization. So that is a lot.
Oh no, how many baby elephants is that? I don't want to think about it.
I don't even know.
That's so much. 10,000 pounds?
10,000 tons.
Oh no, that's right. Elephants and tons. That's why I think, because I'm like, how much is a ton? And it's like 3 baby elephants or something. I forget the ratio.
So the Federal Cannabis Act requires that cannabis, it has to be packaged in containers that are opaque or semi-transparent. They have to be tamper-evident. I guess that means that it would be obvious to you if someone had tampered with it, like the peanut butter seals. And it has to be designed to prevent contamination and keep cannabis dry. So those requirements, they're all totally reasonable, I think. But it also means that it's been difficult to find biodegradable materials that meet that criteria. And unfortunately, regulations also prohibit reuse and refill of cannabis packaging right now. So you couldn't right now have like a cannabis oil like container share program where you get a bottle and then you bring it in and it's cleaned and you get a filled one. Because basically the way the regulations work is there has to be like a sealed excise stamp from before it goes to the retailer. So for now anyway, like you couldn't do a weed refill program.
That's a shame. Yeah. It'd be cool if it was like David's tea where you bring in your little tin and you're like, please fill it.
I'd be so down with that. But yeah, I looked at my cannabis oil container and apparently it can be recycled, but I also doubt the dropper can be. So in some cases, if you're getting something in a container, like look to see if it can be recycled. And then there's one brand, at least in Canada, there's one brand that has launched a recycling program, and it's Tweed.
I love Tweed.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're interested and you use Tweed weed, then check out their recycling program through TerraCycle. Yeah, so it's not like there isn't any attention to the issue of like single-use packaging in cannabis production. There are entire companies that are just set up around sustainable packaging. It's just that like it's a fairly new industry and the regulations make it even more likely than for the normal business that you're going to default to single-use plastics. But the good thing about having a lot of hippies involved in cannabis startups is that hippies tend to care about the environment. So a lot of companies are focused on this issue. And the push is also coming from consumers who want it and have said they're willing to pay more for eco-friendly cannabis. So yeah, then the next question I asked myself is like, which consumption method is the most eco-friendly? And the answer that I found is, well, it is definitely not disposable vapes. That is not environmentally friendly.
I can't tell you which one is best, but I can tell you which one is worst.
It's absolutely the worst. One article that I read called it the K-cups of cannabis.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, yeah, that's not... yeah? I didn't even know disposable vapes were a thing until just now when you mentioned them. I was like, why would that be a thing? Just get a nice vape.
Yeah, so just get a nice vape if you're going to vape. And probably the most eco-friendly is if you live in a place where you can easily grow your own sunlit marijuana.
That's the ultimate farm to table.
Yeah. Yeah. Farm to table, like whittle a pipe out of wood. But for those of us that won't do that for multiple reasons, every method kind of has its own benefits and drawbacks. So like, I think the way to think about this isn't like which method is the most eco-friendly rather than like, how can I make whatever option I'm choosing as eco-friendly as possible? I did, though, try to look through the things you might want to think about with ethics and different consumption methods. So I'll start with flower, which might be the most sort of environmental type of weed you can get because it's basically just the plant. And actually, you can buy it in bulk on the Ontario government website. That was good.
Like how much bulk?
I think the biggest I saw was 28 grams, so...
Whoa!
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Just to give people a reference point, if you're smoking 10 grams a month, that's a bit of a heavy user. So 28 grams, if you're a heavy user, should last you for 3 months.
Yeah.
It would last an average person like a year.
Yeah. I think it's so funny that the Ontario government's like, the Canadians, we gotta sell them bulk stuff.
That's true. We do like bulk stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, the website also lets you pick from Ontario-based growers, which I think is nice.
Yeah, BC does that too. So I like to get the BC stuff when I can.
Yeah, and that's one way that you can kind of think about how do I reduce the transportation emissions effects, you know? If you're getting it from close by, it's having to travel less to get to you. So that's all I had for flowers. The next category I have are oils. So that includes like the oil droppers, which is what I like to use, as well as sprays and capsules. I don't know if you've ever ingested weed through a capsule before.
I thought about it and then I saw the price and I was like, I'll just get a spray.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't get the appeal of those at all.
They're so much more expensive. I mean, weed tastes like shit. So, I can see why people would want to use it as a capsule. You don't taste it. But like the spray I got in Newfoundland was peppermint flavored. It was delicious.
To be honest, I don't really like it when they flavor the sprays. Like, that was delightful peppermint spray, but I just like the oil because I like to taste that I'm ingesting cannabis.
Kristen's like, I gotta get my money's worth.
It's like, all right, this is what I'm doing now.
Yeah, otherwise they just give you coconut oil. You'd never know.
So yeah, whether you're getting an oil, a spray, or a capsule, though, capsules, they're just pills. I don't know why I didn't say that earlier, but in case somebody didn't know that,
yeah,
they're just pills. Yeah. So yeah, they're all oil-based marijuana concentrates, and they're all ones that you ingest. So one thing to think about is you could try to look for the containers to be PET1 recyclable. That's the one that's most likely to actually be recycled by your recycling facility. That's one way. You're probably necessarily going to be getting some plastic packaging if you're getting an oil, but you can at least make sure it's recyclable. And you can also try to go with a brand that has a recycling program. And then tell your member of parliament that you want to get high without wrecking the oceans. That's step 3. Yeah, so you could also try to make cannabis oil from cannabis flower if that's something that interests you. If you bought this 28 grams of weed and you're like, I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, they're not going to last the whole year. You got to turn them into something else. When I was doing our challenge, I say in quotation marks.
This was the most pleasant challenge I've ever had.
I actually researched how to turn flour into butter to cook with. And I was like, yikes, that's a lot of work. And it's going to make my house smell like weed for 2 days because you got to bake it in the oven. So I just used my oil and I just I did not scientifically method that at all. I was like, I'm making 6 muffins, better put 6 hits in this and then a little extra for fun.
Yeah, I also concluded that oil seemed like a hassle. And also you need to use a well-ventilated space, which suggests to me that contact high is a real risk. And also I know myself, and there's a reason I'm a better cooker than baker, and that reason is that I'm not precise.
Yeah. Baking is potion making in Harry Potter.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like the risk of making oil that's uneven or that I don't know how strong it is, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
For mine, I took 1 dose of I took 1.5 today of what I would normally ingest and I put it on pizza dough before I cooked the pizza in the oven. And yeah.
Nice. I just mixed mine into my batter. I made lemon poppy seed muffins. I finally made muffins. Actually, I've been making
You
muffins
made
this whole pandemic. Yeah, my muffin tin has been getting so much use.
This sounds weirdly dirty.
Okay, what's the next research thing? Moving on.
Yeah, so there are also other kinds of extracts. I'm not going to talk too much about them, mostly because I could barely grasp what they were. So first, hash is a pressed concentration of the marijuana plant's sticky glands. It can be vaped or smoked. So basically just as like a processed version of, I don't know, it's like kind of a more pressed texture, hard to describe. And then keef, I think I might be saying that right, is another option. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so do you know what keef is?
Yeah. Well, not really. I know that when I grind my flour, my grinder has a keef catcher, so like anything smaller than like a tiny little microscopic piece will stay above, and anything smaller rather will fall down through my little like grate separator thing, and then you got a bunch of like powdered weed at the bottom, which is supposed to be ultra concentrated, I guess.
Yeah, so apparently it refers to the bulbous crystal formation on the top of the marijuana plant's resin gland.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. It's the okay.
Yeah, so apparently it's easier to make cannabis oils from keef, so maybe next time you want to give it a go.
Do you know how much you have to grind to get enough keef to make an oil? It's like a lot of...
I mean, we might be staying at home for a while, so...
Yeah, that's true. I got time to grind. I don't think I have enough weed to grind enough keef to get enough to make oil.
Yeah, so I don't have any ethical things about those, but presumably you want to look at whoever is processing them. Yeah, the next one, so if you're going to roll joints... I was reading an article on environmentally friendly joints, and the first tip, which is practical but also obvious, is like don't litter your roach.
Yeah. Well, I mean don't litter, obviously, but some roaches are better than others because sometimes you get a filter that's plastic and sometimes you get a filter that is biodegradable. So be aware that when you are throwing it away, you might be able to throw it in the compost. I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but yeah, that's a good tip. The other thing is like not all rolling papers are vegan, which is a thing I didn't know, but oftentimes if there are animal products in your rolling papers, it'll either be through animal-based glues. Although, from what I was able to read online, most rolling papers are now using plant-based glues, I think probably because there's no reason not to. And then there can also be animal products present in the dyes. So depending on what, like if you're getting colorful rolling papers or something like that. So just check to see if your rolling papers are vegan, if that's something that matters to you. Another note that not all rolling papers are cruelty-free, but I also was not really able to find information on that beyond somebody saying that it was a concern for them. It doesn't seem to be like a list of cruelty-free versus not cruelty-free rolling papers, and I don't know what the substances are that would be tested on animals, so...
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. If anyone knows more, tweet at us.
Yeah, so you can get eco-friendly rolling papers that are made of hemp or rice, and there are a fair amount of options there, so... If you like to roll a joint, get a plant-based joint, and try to get one that's eco-friendly. If you vape, next one... Don't buy a disposable vape. Don't.
Yeah.
And also make sure that you're recycling your batteries appropriately. So yeah, the other two are edibles and topicals. There's not really much else on either of these beyond that packaging's a concern, so that's especially true for edibles because there's a regulation that no more than 10 mg of THC can be in a package of edibles. So they tend to be in there's a small number that then have to be packaged. So it wouldn't be you wouldn't have an entire jar of cannabis gummies or whatever, unless they were extremely low dosage. So that does end up creating more packaging. It's a concern.
But it's also not, it's a safety measure for people like Kristen who'd get it and they're like, should I just eat all 4 gummy bears at once? It's like, no, stop, that's 10 milligrams, that's 4 hits. You've never done weed before.
Yeah, and also, like, if a kid gets into it, they can't OD, you know?
That's true.
Yeah, so topicals are, I mean, you put them on into lotions and creams and oils that aren't supposed to be ingested. They're supposed to go on your skin or your hair or your nails. There's not a lot known about how topical use versus ingesting works, but the suggestion is that it's going to impact you pretty differently. So those are a little different, but again, the ethical issues are pretty much the same, right? Like, look at what you would have that lotion as, like, if you were just buying it as lotion, like, what are the ethical issues there? And then just add the, like, packaging concerns, and that's pretty much it for cannabis. So anyway, the big ethical issues seem to be sort of environmental, mostly around the single-use packaging, and you can act on that by having good recycling etiquette and by, expressing your consumer desire for sustainability. Beyond that, try to find brands that use more environmentally friendly farming methods, and maybe if animal welfare matters to you, look for a vegan rolling paper.
It'll be interesting to see how this industry grows. It's doing probably pretty well right now during the pandemic.
Yeah. Definitely people have more time on their hands.
Yeah. And everyone's stressed out. And for a lot of people, a lot of people become paranoid on it, but a lot of people relax. So, yeah. Well, how are you feeling? Are you higher now than at the beginning of the episode?
Yes, but less high than in the middle.
Nice.
How about you?
Yeah, I was also highest in the middle, although I'm still, you know what, I might be at the top of the curve on that one. I don't like that analogy I just used.
I know. Not great. This is how we get canceled.
Oh boy, yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you had a great 420. We did. This was a blast. It was nice to do a fun one since the last one we did was about COVID and inequality. So we needed something we needed to pick me up.
Yeah, Alex was great. It was just really depressing subject matter.
If you guys want to add us, we're on Twitter at Pullback Podcast. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, but we're probably most active on Twitter, and we're looking forward to talking to you guys soon.
Yeah.
You were on such a roll.
I know, and then I started thinking about how Anyway, I started thinking too much about how I'd forgotten the last word that I wanted to say, and then I got all in my head.
All right, we'll take a moment.
Sorry, this was me with the dogs yesterday.
Oh my god. Okay.